Now, should we have a look at the Southport situation? Because it's just shocking,
It belies
really.
belief sometimes.
New details have emerged about the Home Office missing several opportunities to identify the Southport child killer, as Mr Rudakubana, as a terror threat.
Yes, it's all over the front page of the Sunday Times. It's pretty hard reading. It claims that the review has found that Rudakubana was referred to an anti-extremism programme 3 times.
It's also revealed his obsession with mass shootings was dismissed by counter-terror officers as an interest in world news, that he wasn't in danger of being radicalised.
It beggars belief, doesn't it? It certainly does in hindsight. Political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heale, joins us now in the studio. I mean, is it a case of hindsight being 20/20, or is it absolutely unforgivable that these things were overlooked?
Well, this is what the review is going to find out. There's going to be a public inquiry and also a look by various levels of government at really what went wrong here. As you say, the Sunday Times has got this report done by the North West team of Prevent, and it looks particularly at the 3 different times that Axel Rudakubana was referred to Prevent, and on each occasion it seems that they were dismissed. Now, I think when we talk about sort of terror and how people become radicalised, we often think about ideology, the role of, different philosophies involved, etc. But also this man seemed to have an obsession with just violence, and it seems ridiculous that authorities were willing to repeatedly overlook his rather perverse interest in terror incidents, different bits about how people have been killed, etc. in the London terror attacks. School shootings, and were able to dismiss that as an interest in world news. I mean, this clearly wasn't someone who was reading the papers every day. This was someone who was interested in some pretty sick stuff. And so Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, is very much leaning into this and saying that multiple layers of the state have failed in all of this.
We know from interviews that were given after the sentencing that there were these various sort of conferences held between different agencies about him, and we were told with confidence that these conferences had taken place, but not what the outcome of any of it was.
Yes, and I think that's going to be one of the things that finds out. I mean, there's so many different strands to it, which is quite interesting. One of which is about him potentially having, I think it was an autism diagnosis, and actually Yvette Cooper is now saying that it needs to be looked at in terms of neurodivergent cases, etc. Does that inhibit discussion around this? People often get things dismissed, etc., and therefore are those red flags being overlooked? And many of the different authorities were involved, mental health services, police, etc., and of course 3 times Prevent looked at it in 2019 and 2 separate cases in 2021. All these things are going to come out in the inquiry, but it certainly seems that it doesn't seem a great case again in which one case can slip through the cracks of our different systems.
It's interesting, though, you say one case. It's very clear from reading almost in between the lines of this report that the counter-terrorism officers and various other agencies that became involved don't just come across this once in a blue moon. There are a lot of people who fall into this criteria. Young men, particularly, who are obsessed with violence and knives and the school shootings thing, and researching things on the internet that are, frankly, really bad for anyone to look into.
Absolutely, and there's stories in other papers today, including The Sun on Sunday, which is talking about how Yvette Cooper and the Science Secretary, Peter Kyle, are demanding that content about the Southport cases be removed online. And some of the tech giants, which are some of the issues, obviously, we've seen in terms of America, recent coverage, etc., have been unwilling, it seems, to take some of that content down from online. And, of course, that then makes it a real issue for the authorities, because some of this stuff can be flagged in offline situations, in person, etc. But a lot of it's happening online, away from everything. And it then gets into difficult issues, such as when he's ordering rice into his next-door neighbour. How on earth can you legislate against that? So
yeah, that's right. He didn't. There were some things that were delivered not to his home because he knew that his parents might find him out. They were delivered to his neighbour. And
his neighbour, took in a package, absolutely, and then gave them back over. Maybe the parent was involved in signing off some of this. There have been some claims about that. And this is a difficult issue, and I have some sympathy for elements of the authorities, the ones who are saying something like that is very difficult on the ground to legislate against. The key thing is when it gets to institutions and patterns being repeated across the country. Now, there's some reports in the paper suggesting that things like Prevent have changed slightly. They're looking more at cases. I think there's been a 10% increase in cases with neurodivergent cases, which have been referred to Prevent. So there's a sense that perhaps that things have changed slightly, but obviously it clearly wasn't in this tragic case enough.
No, certainly wasn't.
It is very depressing, though, isn't it, that very clearly this sort of obsession with violence is to these counter-terrorism officers, it's not uncommon.
Absolutely
they see
not.
a lot of it.
Absolutely, and it's evolving completely, and obviously a lot of it is happening online, and there is going to be something for them to really challenge. It's moved from sort of 4 or 5 groups in a cell or something like that into lone individuals who are clearly able to get a knife and cause some havoc on the streets of Britain.
OK, James, thank you very much indeed. Excuse me, my voice is going. There's no point in all of this, as a lot of it, I mean, they've looked at the knife coming from Amazon, and there's obviously going to be all this hoo-ha about what you can find online. The problem is, that can't be the focus of all of this, because you can't stop that. It's Pandora's box. It is open. So you can't try to... If they start saying, well, we need to legislate about what you can see online, that isn't going to work. There are always ways around it. You've got to look at how you detect and work on cases that you can identify, even if they are increasing exponentially.
It's very depressing that it is increasing, by the sound of it, and that
it's awful, isn't it?
These various agencies and the police and counter-terrorism officers are having to deal with this a lot. It's not just, unfortunately, it's not just one case, by the sound of it.
And all this stuff about what you find on Google and all the rest of it, I mean, a lot of this is going to be dark web, isn't it? Which makes up about 99% of the internet, is the stuff most of us never see.
We talk about how AI is going to help us be able to detect certain things. Surely they can put AI onto this. There must be algorithms, or whatever they call them, that can detect whether there are certain young people who are viewing too much of this, or doing too much of that, or buying too much of something.
Yeah, I'm sure they could, but then you've got civil liberties, haven't you? Because it's, in effect, we'd all be being permanently snooped on.
Yes, we would. But we are anyway, aren't we?
Well, we sort of are, but then do we have to approve it? I don't know. It's a really tough one, actually. Would you rather be snooped on, or would you rather people got through the loopholes and were able to look at this awful stuff?
But when you say we are already, I mean, if you're looking for, a wardrobe online, and suddenly the cookies that will follow you and try and sell you all sorts of different wardrobes or something, you are being followed, you are being monitored.
Yes, you
all
are.
the time.
But the difference with the AI thing is that then would have to be fed back to someone, and it would be alerting the authorities if you were looking at too many wardrobes.
Yes.
Or whatever. I mean, do you know what I mean? It would be a case of being monitored by the authorities.
Yes. I mean, we're in the realms of almost science fiction here.
Oh, yeah.
There have
we
been
are.
movies made about being arrested for a crime that you haven't yet committed.
Yeah. And it is heading in that direction. But I don't know, is it a price worth paying to try and prevent the sort of tragedy, horror that we saw in Southport? I don't know. I haven't got the answer. Perhaps you've got some thoughts on that, though. gbnews.com/yoursaid. So let's have a look at the Sunday Times, should we? And the fatal errors around the Southport killings.
Yeah, so it's just still going on. They believe that he had an interest in current affairs, but he wasn't being radicalised. And intentionally, I'm not going to say his name. And it's but clearly he was. He was looking at all manner of genocides. They said that one person said that he could name every single genocide and how many people had been killed, including Rwanda, Hitler, Genghis Khan. He's got such a breadth of obsession with it.
And yet the counter-terrorism people who are trained in this looked at all of that and said he's just interested in world news.
I think this is some sort of cover-up, if I'm honest. Obviously, this isn't an assumption. But there's so many points where there's been failures. In terms of, potential connections with his family and the Rwanda genocide. Keir Starmer does not seem to be wanting to dig deep into that. And I do think when we're seeing these sorts of heinous crimes, we need to have the parents involved as to what was going on in the house. He caught knives on his son before. What happened after that? I think there needs to be a public inquiry, potentially a judicial review.
Well, there is going to be an inquiry.
Yeah.
So, and maybe we'll get to the bottom of that. But there's clearly, it's gone very, very badly wrong.